On the other hand, I must say, I thought Obama's very small statement, wasn't very short, after Ben Ali left, admittedly, was as strong as any statement I'd ever seen. I mean, that I thought was a good sign. I mean, given our previous policy, I thought this was a good gesture. And now I think we're doing the right thing, both in terms of investment and providing financial support and making all the right signals. And I'm hoping that we're careful, that we have to be careful. I mean, the Tunisians are extremely sensitive, justifiably, about America's involvement with Tunisia under Ben Ali. We supported this dictatorship. We made this dictatorship viable when it shouldn't have been viable. And we can't sweep away that. We've got to acknowledge it, and I think we could possibly justify it. But in any case, so we have to be very sensitive with the Tunisians at all levels. And it wasn't accidental in one of the visits that Hillary Clinton made to Tunisia. They were demonstrators, opposed to that visit and wanted her to leave. Not large, but nevertheless, it does reflect a certain sentiment. So I'm hoping now that the focus will be really on Tunisia for Tunisians, and it won't be a fight against terrorism, which is justified by supporting a dictator whose people, universally hate.
Thank you for your very enlightening remarks, especially your proposition that we should get rid of exceptionalism, that the Arab culture, Arab mind, Middle East are different. And I think we are rising to the universals, the human dignity, the desire for participation, democracy, these are human desires. So I hope the American public and the mass media and the political circle will not use again and again that Middle East is different from us.
I fully agree with you. I hope that is sustained and it's just not a temporary meeting. Yes.
So this was a very strong proposition on your part. Now, I have two questions for you. One is the process of evolution of dictatorship in North Africa and Middle East after independence, and how far the international interests, foreign interests, have been instrumental in making dictators for the people. So there is some quarters in Middle Eastern society who think that the foreigners would like to deal with one person, making a deal, take the question of BP and Benghazi and Bin Laden, and taking the question of Iran, the Shah, and oil. So this is a very significant thing that we have also to start rethinking our orientation, that some of these dictators have been manufactured by the Western interests. And we have to admit that and avoid in the future. The reason I am raising it, now this is a window of opportunity for the US leadership, the European leadership, to help Tunisia, Egypt, not to go through the old route of dealing with a strong man, as you suggested. Now, the third question about the revolution. And, it's not just enough that people do not fear the state. As you know, 2 years ago, the massive movement in Iran was much stronger than Tunisia, than Egypt, very strong. But in this equation, we always overlook the other side.
True.
The aggressive political regime with no respect for human rights. And here, the Western power, again, have a role to play. I'm sure you are witnessing the role of American diplomacy, both in Egypt and in Tunisia and now in Libya, to cool off dictatorship, get them out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Those are good questions. Let me sort of contextualize your first question, or the comment, the point you made about U.S. support for dictators, or at least you went a little beyond that, saying that maybe the U.S. actually, you know, produced these dictators. I'm not sure. That's my words, not yours, but. Yeah, manufactured them and so on. I don't think I would go that far. Remember now, during the Cold War, it was sort of an ugly period where principles didn't count much for anything. Survival did. In a day when, you know, the notion of nuclear holocaust wasn't hypothetical, it was real. So across the globe, as you well know, the United States made arrangements, voluntarily or otherwise, with some of the nastiest people in the world. And I think we knew this. And the choices were presented, unfortunately, in this very black and white dichotomous way. And it would have been nice if a more subtle, nuanced understanding of world politics was possible. But I sort of understand that mentality. You know, as academics, it's easier enough for us to stand in front of students and, you know, pontificate all kinds of abstract ideas, and then we go home and have a beer, and that's the end of that. Policymakers have to make decisions. Now, after the Cold War, now here I think your point is really well taken. After the Cold War, where that justification no longer existed, there I thought we should have begun a major psychological transformation regarding the mechanism of that had been put in place, that even President Eisenhower had phrased very explicitly as the military-industrial complex, whose justification was the Cold War. That should have been seriously challenged and rethought after the end of the Cold War for a whole bunch of obvious reasons, including financial ones. And it wasn't, and it made even less so after September 11th. So what happened after September 11th is Islamism or Islamic terrorism just substituted for communism and gave further justification for the military-industrial complex to maintain itself, for which you now again began to justify the need to work with people who we don't like, but you know, they're helping us in the war against terror. Now we're confronting what I consider to be a revolutionary historic moment. It is of historic consequence, not just for the Middle East and North Africa, but I think for the world. Not just for the principles of democracy and freedom, which I think are enormously important, but also because we have to look, because when I said we have to sort of overcome essentialism and Orientalism and look at the Middle East and Arabs and Muslims in a very different way, we're not just talking about the Middle East anymore. We're talking about the whole world. Muslims are in the whole world. So this view has global implications. So I think now we hopefully, what's happening in Tunisia, what's happening in Egypt and elsewhere, we will begin to shift more along lines, not only that are principled, but that at the end of the day are actually in our national security interest. Going back to the argument I made earlier in the connection between why somebody among the 5 choices he or she has when they're confronted by an oppressive state, one of them being, shit, I'm going to go and fight in Afghanistan or what have you. But that now is going to be, they don't have to do that. I don't have to take up a gun. I'll go and vote this bum out, and so on and so forth. So hopefully, I mean, I don't think we've overcome it. I think we're still tied to, you know, dictators because we think that they're, you know, but I'm convinced that ultimately it's against our interest, and I mean in a national security sense, not in a philosophical sense of principles.
Thank you for that talk. I really enjoyed that very much. You talked a little bit about the democratic prognosis for Tunisia, and I'm wondering about another component of outlooks for the future of the country, which is the economic one. So, as you know, and as I saw during my short time in Tunisia, they had a formidable social welfare program. And I think that, yes, this was a mechanism used by the government to kind of quell dissent. So I'll give you health care, and I'll give you some capers, but just go home and be quiet for a while. But I also think it was a positive force for unifying the country, to instill a people value of community, of
Right.
the need to take care of one another and redistribute the resources in the country. And I'm wondering what you think of the future of
Sure.
this system, which is really concerning to me because
Right.
as we see Tunisians defining freedom, however they define that, I would hope, and I'm sure I'm not alone, and I hope that doesn't translate into market freedom, economic freedom, like it is in the United States in a capitalist system, the freedom to fail. And so I'm wondering what you think about the future.
Yeah, that's
for-
that's a very good question, and one that people have commented upon. And I think I don't think it's not an easy question to answer, because clearly this is a very small economy, as you know. It has limited resources. It's in a highly competitive global economic environment. However close it is to the European market, however skilled its workforce is, and it is, and women are part of that workforce. So they have a lot of advantages. And I think that economy will come back because the Tunisians, I know Lebanon also, the Tunisians and Lebanese are just, I mean, I want them on my side. These guys, I mean, they're the original capitalist. They could teach us a few things. Just give them the chance. Give them the chance. And finally, you know, I was going to use the example of Europe, but Europe is slowly disassembling all its social welfare system, its health plan, and so on. So I was going to say, you know, even Sweden is no longer Sweden. But in other words, you can have a vibrant economy, basically capitalist, that has a socialist consciousness and that provides the instruments necessary to exactly, you know, have a social welfare safety net. That keeps people together. I mean, that they've had for a long time. Tunisians, I think, still want that. The problem is that the resources at this stage, at this moment, of course, are limited, and they've been seriously affected, of course. But I just think that it doesn't have to be this crass market capitalism, as you say, you know, of the kind that we're familiar with, and that doesn't take into account the human cost. But at the end of the day, political freedom is absolutely essential for any kind of economic prosperity. The economic pie is produced by the economy. The dividing up of that pie is done by politics. And the way that pie has been cut up all these years is half of it is for me, 3/4 is for me, Ben Ali and my family, and the rest of you get a quarter. And so however vibrant that economy was, and it was, go read World Bank reports about Tunisia. It's the favorite child of the World Bank, A+, 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 macroeconomics, A+. Then the guy sets himself on fire. I guess he wasn't reading the World Bank reports, you know. So that's, you know, I fully agree with you, and I'm just hoping that the political freedoms and opportunities will engender what I believe is already within Tunisian society to maximize, because at the end, listen, it's about human capital. Tunisia's human capital. They got olive oil. They don't have oil. They've got olive oil, and they've got, you know, phosphates, but everybody's got phosphates, and they've got tourism, you know. But they've got minds, and they're willing to work, and they're smart. So I think they could do really well. I mean, I would say, watch out Singapore, watch out Taiwan, you know, Tunisia's coming down the road. Anyway.